Welcome. I'm Pamela Rickia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Sue Patterson. Hi, Sue.
Hello.
So here's the idea for this episode. I get a lot of questions around unschooling during the teen years, as I imagine you do as well, Sue. So I thought, it would be really helpful to focus a whole episode just on this topic. And I know that you have a special place in your heart for unschooling teens because that led you to conduct that teen survey a few years ago, which you eventually...
That I ever so subtly put over here. Look at one of those neon flashing arrows. You know?
It is a really interesting book. And you know what? I'm going to link in the show notes to my review some of the stuff that I found really interesting about it. But anyway, what that meant was I thought you'd be an awesome guest to dive into this topic with. So to get us started, I think that there are typically kind of two periods during the teen years that unschooling parents can find challenging. So even if we've been unschooling reasonably comfortably for a few years, and the first one is that transition into the teen years. And I want to talk about that transition from both the parents and the teen's perspective, but let's start with the parents' perspective because that's the work that we have to do. So let's dive into some of the conventional messages that we can find bubbling up during this time and how we might shift to see them through the lens of unschooling.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times people have that thing in their head about it's time to buckle down. You know, it's time to... you've had all this fabulous childhood and now it's time to get serious. And even like biblically, where it's got put away your childish things. So it's like constantly reinforced in us that childhood's fun, adulthood isn't. So let's transition.
Yeah, they have to start getting ready for it, right? Because it's okay to let your child play, and that makes sense to you. But now, when the teen years are starting, it's like, just a few years down the road, they're going to need to be adults, and now they should start, like you said, buckling down, getting serious. I feel like all of a sudden we feel like they need to start producing things. And I think that ties into with like what their school friends are doing at school too, at this time. They're doing more things that look, impressive in the educational sphere. And that can throw us for a loop too, can't it? Because we want to start seeing more worthwhile things. We want to start seeing things that might someday turn into a job or just producing something that we can kind of show, something tangible. That can throw us off.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think, okay, that's what unschooling is about, that we're going to have this total play thing, and then they will reach for that algebra book off the shelf. Or they will then they will choose to do academics that look like school academics. And, that's not the case.
Well, that's a really good point.
And because we're not there yet, we get that doesn't get resolved in our head. And then we think, well, shoot, I've been unschooling for 6 years. I should know this by now. But unschooling for 6 years when they were like 5 to 11, that's a whole different world than, or at least in our minds, we've told ourselves that's a whole different world.
Well, yeah, I think that's definitely part of it because, it's something, especially when your eldest starts reaching the teen years, right? You've really not been in a situation where you have had to really think of unschooling through that lens of older children, right? So understanding the value in play, that kind of information's all over the place, later readers, all that kind of stuff is reasonably, I'm not going to say easy, but, there's lots of discussions around that. You can find lots of information. You can do that first step.
Well, and there's more people, really, because didn't you see when your kids were growing up that there's a ton of people in the support groups around age 8, when your kid's 8. by the time your kid's 14, that's a smaller number because a lot of people have kind of fallen off along the way, so there are not going to be as many people writing about it and asking about it as just the volume of people that are unschooling when they're little.
Yeah, so I think at this point it's really important for us, for people to recognize that this is a transition, and that feeling uncomfortable isn't a bad thing. It's not a judgment on you as a bad unschooling parent or anything like that, because this is
like maybe I did something wrong.
Yeah, but it's definitely a time like that. That's definitely a clue, if you're feeling uncomfortable with this, that it's time to dig into unschooling further. It's like, okay, now I've got this new thing that's coming up. There's a new stage in our lives, and now I want to go dig into what unschooling can look like at this time, right? Because
and I think anytime we have that feeling, that like, oh gosh, maybe I did it wrong, or oh gosh, maybe my kid wasn't a good candidate for unschooling, or maybe all those kinds of things, then we know that's just fear talking. That's just leftover schooly kind of stuff. It's why that deschooling really never ends. Because, it's always a new game. It's always a new players with different skills and development, and your baggage that you've brought to teen years doesn't even get revealed to you when your kid is 7.
Because you're busy with your kid at 7, right? All the unschooling things you do with a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old. Yeah. And then when you get here, now it is, life may not look different for them, but that's what we're talking about it from the parents' perspective right now. It looks different for us because we're noticing the age. We're noticing things bubbling up for us. It's like, we have expectations of a 14-year-old that I didn't really realize they're coming up now. So now, like you said, this is the deschooling piece again, to start figuring out where those came from, to start looking at learning through the lens of their interests still, and realizing and looking at them in action, and asking other parents, doing more research again, just to understand how learning still is learning. They still learn the same way. Their interests may or may not change. It's again, I think we can just get caught back into that timeline, right? Their age-based thing, that they need to be doing certain things at certain ages, and to revisit why that doesn't work on an individual level. We understand why school needs to keep it at that way, because they need to get kids through during those certain amount of years, etc. But when we're unschooling, we're choosing a much more individualized lifestyle where they're just following their interests and passions, and to look at it again and remind ourselves why that works.
Right. Because it's not an individualized lifestyle until they get to be teens, when now they must choose from 3 boxes or choose from 2 tracks, or, it's still an individualized life. But we also, as parents, we have a lot of pressure that comes when we have teenagers that other people are putting on us and we're putting on ourselves. When you go to a family get together and somebody's telling you all the things that your nieces and nephews are National Honor Society, or they're in this math club, or they're taking this school trip, or they're doing these things. And we're like, they're playing video games. They're having great conversations at midnight with me. They're all the things. I mean, and there's like, I just pick those 2 things because those are the things, that people get scared of. They're like, well, that's not enough. And it's enough, it doesn't always stay like that. It moves around, and it grows, and it, we end up like you were saying, it's individualized. So the path is going to be different, and it's not going to look like those niece and nephews. And so you've got to like remember your why. You've got to remember, why does this matter? Why does it matter that we're not stuck on these two tracks, college track or non-college track? And, and
I think it comes back to, I was going to say, spending that time again, like often these fears can come up when we get a little bit disconnected from our kids too, right? Which can happen around this time, because, maybe you've been unschooling pretty comfortably for years, and everybody gets into doing their things, and, off we go. And we're not looking for the learning anymore. You know what I mean? Because we know. We looked at that, a few years ago when we started
unschooling. For a couple of years when we started or something.
Yeah, we were so worried about what are they learning? What are they learning? And then we figured that out, and we saw that they were learning all the time. And now, as they hit the teen years, all of a sudden what bubbles for us is kind of a change in those learning expectations, and revisiting that self-awareness for ourselves to recognize that these fears are just old, maybe conventional assumptions or, ideas that are bubbling up for us that we just haven't considered yet. And then, then we can get back to connecting with our child and seeing the learning that they are doing, and seeing, now we've got years to look back on typically too, right? And see the threads of things and see what uniquely is interesting to them and the learning that they do. And
that's really a great point, because a lot of times I have clients who then look back and they say, oh, we really didn't do a lot. Maybe we messed up. And in fact, when they start listing all the things that that really happened, there was a lot. Yeah. But it didn't look like conventional school. So no, you can't, they had gotten past feeling the need to check geography, check reading, check math, check. They got past that. But then when they start getting fearful again, that little voice in the back of their head is saying, oh yeah, you didn't do any of the creative writing. Oh yeah, you didn't do any of the civics. And so I think then you've got to kind of reacquaint yourself with what you did. Remind yourself. Look for the positives. Look for the good things that came. Look for all the things that didn't happen, because they were having this great path. And all the things that did happen because they were having this great path. There's a lot.
Yeah.
I think too, we get our ego kind of wrapped up in it, and we think that somebody says, oh, well, their kid is only doing this. And you've got to, that's that why, you've got to figure out, no, I'm doing this for a choice, because I think it's important that they follow their own path, that I not spoon feed them from one box to another, and that looks messy and it doesn't always look clear. And that's okay too, because I'm really okay with it. And if you're not okay with it, then let's get okay with it, because it's a good thing, We say, oh, we want all these critical thinkers. We want all this individualized thought. But we don't like what that looks like to get there, because what's stateful. Because that's how you learn. You try and you're like, oh, not that. And now we adjust, and then we adjust, and then we adjust. And it doesn't really bode well for Thanksgiving dinners when you're trying to, trot out your kid in front of somebody else's kid. And, if you're doing that kind of stuff, it won't look that great. But that's okay, because you're past that.
Because, because that's not your value. That's not why you're doing it, to be impressive to other people, right? And so, so from the parent's point of view, when you find this bubbling up, it really is our work to do again, to revisit our why, to sit with the fear, to realize where that's coming from, and to re-energize our reasons, really, you know, and to look to our kids and see all that they are doing. And I
Right.
know you'll get back to that place, that understanding, but it is work to do. Don't stay stuck in the fear. Once you realize this is what's happening, do the work to move through it.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean just stick your head in the sand and know, okay, they say it's okay. No,
Pam and
pull
Sue's
out
gonna be okay.
let's look at them. Let's see what parts, where's the rational part and where's the irrational part? Because that's what fears are, you know, there's like some little grain of something that's true. And then the rest of it
yeah,
grew
it's
around it.
similar in that a lot of us go through this. That's why I say this is kind of one of the typical periods, but it's going to be different for everyone because we all have different experiences. We have different kids. We had a different upbringing. Like we have so many different expectations or constellation of expectations that it really is our individual work to go through, right?
Right.
Okay, so now let's look from our child's perspective. So, what if we find that maybe they seem to be struggling some with this transition into the teen years? So, let's talk about what this time might look like through their eyes and how we might support them as they move through that.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember is that we really are doing something different. And all of society, it's in the air, you know, that everybody is going in this one direction on this conveyor belt, and your kid's not. And so, you know, I think if I look back at the things that I did or didn't do with my kids, I think I wish I had talked a little more about why we were making some of the choices we make. They didn't need to hear it when they were 6. But they may need to hear it while they're teenagers because they're up against people that say, you've never used a Scantron, you don't know what that is. Or, you know, you're going to work in fast food restaurants the rest of your life because you don't know how to do this. People say that stuff to them all the time because our guys really are out intermingling with other people because they're following their path. They're following their interest. And so they're going to see people who are foolish thinking people. Or they're going to have relatives that are, you know, going to say things like, aren't you worried about? Do you kind of wish you could? And so if you've never had those conversations with them, which I'm not saying have them when they're younger, but have them when they get to this age where they kind of are a little more introspective, you can say, yeah, we did this on purpose. This really wasn't just because nobody wanted to get up in the morning and catch the bus. You know, it's a little bigger than that. You know?
That is such a great point. And you know what? You're right. That it's around this age that those conversations bubbled up in our family because the kids were now starting to be out on their own with their friends and with their friends' families. And, you know, these comments were being made, and then we'd be having conversations about it after, you know. And I mean, it's something you might be able to try bringing up on your own, like just, you know, asking a question here or there or making a comment and just seeing what kind of reception it gets. If you're just planting a seed, right? And then that can come up in conversation later. You know, you each, that's why there's no like one way to unschool. Everybody knows, you know, your child, or you're getting to know your child.
Yeah.
Right?
And you know that if you start to tell them something about unschooling and they're suddenly looking out the window wishing you were finished, it's time to wrap it up.
Move on,
you know,
to something more interesting.
Know that you don't, it's not like you have like this one moment that you get. You have their whole life. Exactly. But like you said, dropping a seed and you're dropping a seed so that when somebody does come up to them, they can say, no, we have a plan. Check with mom.
Well, and that's the other thing too. That's I think is really important, certainly at this stage for your child, early teen, is to be really paying attention in your conversations to the comments that they make. To understand what thought might be underneath those, so that you have an idea of what they might be concerned about, so
Right.
you can share those little tidbits. It's not like you have an unschooling, 101 outline that you want to get across over the next 6 months. No, it's the same as learning about anything that might be interesting. It's connecting it to a moment. It's connecting it to something that's happened in their lives now. And
Right.
even for kids who aren't big into doing a lot of group activities or going outside a lot, because you always hear that, right? My kid likes
Yeah.
to stay home and likes to. That still comes up. These things still come up, whether they're
Right.
through like online
Oh,
conversations,
absolutely.
just reading
Or just
online.
watching TV.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you
yeah,
see that every show that's geared towards a teenager happens in a school.
yeah.
you know? Or,
Oh, that's
it's
such
really,
fodder
really
for great
hard to
conversation.
come across. Do what?
They're great
It's
fodder
what?
for conversations, TV
Oh,
shows, and
yeah,
movies, and
absolutely.
everything, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
yep.
And that's what I guess I mean when I say it's kind of in the air,
Yeah,
because it
yeah, yeah.
really, it's just like everywhere that, from television shows to back to school sales to, just school is everywhere. And
Yeah.
so they maybe didn't notice when they were younger, and now they're in that, from a from growth and development standpoint, they are naturally feeling a little bit like everybody else knows something I don't know, and they start to feel self-conscious. And so what do they're going to feel it about the thing that makes them kind of an outlier, right? So whatever makes them a little different from what they see on TV, you need to kind of help them figure out. Some of that is your strength. Some of that is this thing we've deliberately tried to protect, so that you could have it, and you could have the time and the space to move at your own pace. And that's what those guys don't get to have. And that could be the sum total of the conversation. And then another conversation comes later, but that way they know that you are doing this on purpose,
Yeah, that's such a
So,
great point. And sometimes it's just a sentence here, like we were talking about those
yeah.
seeds, just like a comment here, a comment there. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I find, in general, that parents have seem to have a little bit harder time with, is just having those conversations, you know, like any conversation, asking their kid, talking to them about, what's going on, what's happening. If there's some sort of uncomfortableness, like working it out together, having those conversations. And if we're a bit fearful about our unschooling choice, we can almost subconsciously pull back from unschooling related conversations with them, right? Because if we feel like, oh, I'm worried I'm going to come across like I'm trying to convince them,
Right.
that because maybe part of me thinks this was a wrong choice, you know, it's time to work through all that and to have the
Right.
conversations, right? Because, or else you're just kind of putting up a wall there, and then everybody starts to get more and more uncomfortable.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
The other
Yeah.
piece I wanted to mention was that something I noticed too, in the early teen years, as they transition into that time, you might find that they cocoon kind of for a while. They
Well, I'm
might
glad you
feel
said that. Yeah.
they might feel a little at loose ends, I think, because they can be losing interest in the things that they used to love when they were a
Right.
bit younger, and they're like, it doesn't catch my attention as much anymore, but they haven't quite found yet
What's
new.
gonna, yeah.
There's that
Mhm.
transition time there too, to be completely supportive and understanding of. But I've seen that pretty regularly as well. You too?
Right. I do too. And I think that as parents, if we can see that as just normal, that if we can try to look at things from like a bigger arc, as opposed to he hasn't come out of his room in days. Which, be careful, because sometimes we get caught up in saying that kind of stuff, and in fact, they've come out of their room. But we say they haven't come out in days, and they went to Taekwondo, or they came down and fixed some food, and maybe you didn't have a big conversation with them. Maybe you're talking about a lack of connection that's kind of happening. So as the parent, do something, make some food, show up at the door, say, hey, what you want some of this? Make something that smells really great downstairs. That usually brought mine down. And I think just kind of somehow convey to them that this is okay. Mm-hmm. This isn't a bad thing, to want to be by yourself, to want to have your own thoughts, to stare at the ceiling for a lot of hours. That's okay. Mm-hmm. Everybody isn't just lining up to do one activity after another, and I mean, some kids are, but it's okay to not be that kid. And I think I think we've talked about it before on one of the other calls about, we make it like extrovert is like the goal, and introvert is bad. And no, the world is full of both. We need both. And one isn't better than the other. And so I think parents sometimes have to look at that, because maybe they're introverted and maybe they kind of feel bad about it, or maybe they wish they weren't. Maybe they've got, again, some of their own work to do to figure out, this just personal preference. That's okay. That's part of all of this, is getting to see what is your personal preference, so that you don't have to wait and learn that at 28,
Yeah. And the other great thing to notice, like what I love about embracing and supporting them during that time, is because it's a time when they discover that things change. They're going through this transition and they don't know where it's going to end up, where they're going to go. And what they're going to learn when they eventually, get through it, they're going to be able to look back and to see, oh yeah, there was a time when I was kind of feeling at odds, kind of adrift, and not quite sure what I wanted to do. And, I can trust, look how I made it through that time. Right. And maybe I was a little more
those adrift feelings come up again.
Yeah, exactly.
They will resurface in life over and over, you know, and that way you don't have a panic that somebody's got to fix it fast.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly.
When you do have somebody fix it fast, doesn't that become a problem? Because then you never really looked at, you kind of cheated them out of it, because it would have been better if they could have just learn to sit with it and then see where they wanted to go next and how to do that, as opposed to, and this was my parenting struggle. I'm like a problem solver. I was always trying to fix things quicker, so that nobody's unhappy. And that's not really the best option. It's really important to let them, be with them. Don't say you're on your own. But don't fix it for them. Let them try and tell them it'll be okay, and it'll be okay to make a mistake. It'll be okay to choose terribly, and you will always be standing right there with them. Yeah, and you'll always help them figure it out if they want a little input.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's not solving it for them and telling them, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing, come on, get get out and do this, or come on, pick something
Right.
to do, or, another, but it's the being with them and having the conversations when they want to, sitting quietly beside them as they, maybe play the same old game or watch the same old comfort TV show because they're not
Right.
quite sure what else to do right now. But this gives
Mm-hmm.
them that sense of comfort for a while, that cocooning sense for a while.
Right.
You can
Right.
go with the butterfly metaphor, but no expectation on timelines. But
Right.
yeah, if they
Right.
want to have those conversations, if they say, what do you think? And you suggest 10 things and none of them is interesting to them, it's like, don't take that personally. Don't get upset
Right.
about that. It's like, you know what? Maybe we'll just, do this. I spend lots of time just sitting quietly, with them, just listening to what they want to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
That time is so valuable. You're there to help them bounce things around. You're helping them process their thoughts because when they want to have conversations, and being there quietly also shows them that you trust them implicitly to work through this,
Right.
right? That it's not going to be forever, that it's okay right now, that this is not wrong. There's nothing wrong with this moment. They're good
Mm-hmm.
where they are right now. And
Right.
you're totally happy to be with them, right? That just
Yeah.
gives them so much more support than even if you're sitting there with like that energy of, geez, I wish he was choosing to do something else, or I wish, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you get questions, they don't seem to have a passion, or that kind of stuff. That's okay. They're figuring themselves out. All that quiet time is not blank time. You know what I mean? They're still even if
Right.
you ask them, what are you doing? They're going to say nothing. They're likely going to say
Right.
nothing, right? But
Right.
their brain's not doing nothing. Even when they're
Right.
watching the same old show, things are processing, connections are
Mm-hmm.
being made subconsciously. They're learning how long they're comfortable in this comfort zone. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're learning
Right. Right.
so much about themselves. It's crazy. Even when you can't
Yeah.
see any of it on the outside.
Yeah. And I think it is harder when you have your personality is way different than your child's personality. So you're like, no, we need to be doing group things. We need to be getting out, and as opposed to you have a kid that really is not in the mood.
Mm-hmm.
That's not bad. That's their preference. And you have created a place that they can feel safe enough to say their preference. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's it's okay for them to choose differently. We're not creating little mini me's. That's not our that's not the goal. The goal is to let them unfold at their own pace and to be who they're meant to be. And
That's how they're going to find it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what about some teens who actually are choosing to leave school at this time and transition to unschooling? All right, so first, they've been going to school for quite a few years, and now they're
Right.
probably kind of hitting the high school years, and now they're choosing to leave school. So what might you suggest for parents who find themselves here? I think that whole last conversation we had might be really useful to think of it as a deschooling phase for them, if that's
Right.
what your child finds they need.
Right.
So maybe they might be leaving high school and they have a deep interest already that high school was just kind of getting in the way of, and now they've got the time to completely plow into that, dive in, all their
Right.
time dedicated to that. But they also might need a whole bunch of recovery and deschooling
Right.
time as well, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think as parents, we need to not think, how are we going to balance that?
Yeah.
They're always trying to think about establishing some balance. And, no. And I think balance, again, it's that arc, look at it over the long haul for balance. Never look at balance on today or balance on this week. even balance on this season. How we act in winter is different than how we act in summer. And so we have to always have this bigger look at the whole thing, so that and we're conditioned to think of it like that, because balance when you're in school means 7 subjects every 45 minutes. Let's go, bells ringing, let's go. And that way you have balance, because you've got a little of reading and a little of science and a little of social studies and a little. But that's not the balance that's real life. I think about what you as a parent, think about what's your real life look like? Do you like decide, I'm gonna make this, just for an example, I'm gonna make this quilt. So all my free time is, if I'm not fixing dinner or doing some laundry, I'm working on this quilt. And or whatever, or maybe it's starting to be spring and every spare moment is getting your garden set, because now's the time. So I think that knowing that balance is not that big of a deal in real life. And if you feel off kilter, if you feel like I don't have any time for myself, or okay, then carve it. Let's figure out, what do you really need and how can you get it, And so the same thing happens with kids, is that they have come from this 7 subjects in a day or whatever it is now. And they may think, I need the balance. You may say, well, how are you going to balance that? I know you love theater and you want to be doing everything dance, voice, and acting related, but what are you going to do for science? What are you going to do for these other topics that you think aren't going to be incorporated into their daily life? And some subjects may not be. Some people may not like gardening. That's okay. And so I think that when you've got a kid that's coming home from school, resist that urge to say, okay, we got to have balance. Let them have joy. Let them dive into what they love. Push up on the priority list this connection time between you and them, so that now's the time that you can hear them without hurrying because they got to get to bed because the bus comes at 6:45 and they won't be worth anything if they're not, whatever. And so now you've got your life. And I think that relax, it'll be okay.
I really love that idea to focus on the relationship, because the relationship is the thing that you're going to have for a lifetime, right? And now you have the opportunity to give it the focus, that it deserves, to get to know your child, who they are versus who they had to be to fit into the school system, right? Because those could be super different things.
And a lot of those kids that are leaving at high school, they've had a miserable time.
Yeah.
The last few years have been torturous, and torturous for the whole family, because the family's been trying to meet with the counselors and trying to make them do this, and they've been kind of deputized to be the warden of the school when they're not in a school. And that is, you may have to do a little repair work.
Yeah. No, exactly.
You might need to talk with them a lot about that was perhaps a really bad path. That just, not that
it didn't fit for them. It didn't work. And I think the other piece too is they're going to need, you're going to be, as parents, if you're choosing the unschooling lifestyle, even, now that they're teens, you're going to want to be learning about it. Right. And, you've gotten there enough to make this choice, or even maybe your child has said, I want to do this. And you've learned enough to say, okay, I'm good with it. Let's try it. Right. So keep doing that. And your child, even though they were having a bad experience, they probably they've absorbed lots of that, school in the air that you were talking about before,
Right,
right?
right.
So they too like are going to have a whole bunch of expectations that they're going to be working through. You can be working through, but yeah, just to realize like that first year, just take it off. They still need that deschooling time. We still need that deschooling time, no matter what time, no matter their age when you start,
Right,
to just
right.
really take any of that academic
Mm-hmm.
type pressure, like you said, that balance pressure, and just dive into the relationship and look for fun and joy. I think that's just a
Right,
great way to put it, right?
right,
And
right.
find out who you are now, not the parent who has to, like you said, be kind of controlling and managing the environment so your child can manage at school, and that teen no longer needs to be the person who's trying to fit into that environment. Now you guys
Right.
together can discover who you really are, right?
Right,
Who
right,
that person
right.
really is. So that's awesome. Oh, and I do
Yeah,
have, oh, go ahead.
no, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do have a podcast episode with Noah, who left high school to start unschooling. So I'll put that in the show notes as well, and people can listen to his
Yeah, and
story.
in that homeschooled teens, because there were 75 kids,
Mm-hmm.
15 to 39 kids, several of them left during high school.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them had friends who were in high school, and then that had kind of an impact on them. So that book could be really helpful, when you think, okay, so I'm not going to do anything to create balance. What am I going to do? Well, you're going to read. And that's a really great start, because that book was all about questions that people have about what do they do during those teen years? What does it look like? And, because nobody can say, here's how it looks like this. There's 75 different ways that it looks.
Yeah.
And so that my kid is nothing like that, but kind of like that in this area, and kind of like that in this area. And it just kind of loosens that grip, so that you don't feel like I got to make them like this.
Oh, that's such a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, and how they don't have to do the things you thought were have-tos. They're not have-tos. That's so many of those, right?
I think that's one of the biggest things of deschooling. It was for me, was discovering how much of the internal language for myself that I framed as have to. You have to do this, we have to do that, I have to do this, blah, blah, blah. Opening that up to just say, do you really? Is that something you really have to do? And if I still said yes, and I'd be like, oh, why? It didn't mean that I had to not do it at all. Sometimes when I dug into it, I had been saying I have to do this as a shortcut. If I dug deep enough, there was a reason why I would still choose to do it. But what a different approach when I went to do the thing, when I realized I was choosing it, it wasn't one of those have to do's on my list. I was so much more motivated because I knew my why now, right? Let's go back to knowing your why.
Right? Yeah.
Makes
and so many of those have to's have to do with because they're going to graduate at age 18. And so the school says they have to because that's when they're done with them and they're supposed to be checking their box of finished. And not only is that not even true, but that they have their whole life to learn anything. And 18 is not a magic number, that they have to, some kids are going to understand stuff way sooner, other kids way later. And how fabulous that they don't have to be on some kind of we're all doing it by 18, and that's no longer applicable. And so when you remove that, then suddenly a ton of those have-tos are gone because they were all hinged on that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the other one. I have a free ebook called Unschooling Your Teens, and I have talked to a lot of people that they found that really helpful. That they could just kind of have this whole way of thinking about teenagers from an unschooling perspective kind of wash over them and relax a little bit and know that it's going to be okay. And they're hardwired to learn. Their curiosity may be kind of tamped down a little bit because of all those years in school. And this is going to allow them time to like grow it and not have to bury it and shelve their stuff because they got to do somebody else's stuff. Now they get to try different things. So
yeah,
I'm excited for those people that get to come home, because one of the coolest things about that crowd is they know what they're leaving. They are like, yeah, I think we're done. And as opposed to those kids that are always kind of a little second guessy, they're like, I don't know, would I like to go there? Would it be good? And then they go and they're like, no. But I mean, that's good too, because people have to take whatever path they have to take to resolve the things that are bugging them. But I love those kids that are leaving, because they get to see that their life really is their life. They get to make the choices that are going to work for them, and even make the choices that aren't going to work for them. And that's how they're going to learn to find the ones that will. But
yeah, no, exactly. That whole piece of, I think that's another big question during deschooling is that question of failure, right? We're so
right.
fearful of failure or things going wrong. And I mean, our whole language around it, right? You don't want to make a mistake. I mean, how it's literally a black mark against you in school when you make a mistake, right? But in reality, like in real life, when you're making a choice and it doesn't go the way you expect, you learn so much from it, right? You learn so much more about yourself, like even just about the process of having made that choice in the first place. It's like, oh, what did I miss that might have, told me that wasn't going to go the way I was hoping.
Right.
I mean, just the entire thing. It's just more experience, more knowledge, more understanding of yourself, everything that little mistake gives you for the next time you're making a choice, right? It's just all learning. It's all crazy learning. I love it.
I was just, I don't know where I was writing something about, probably answering somebody's question. And I was, it was becoming really clear that when we're so fearful about making mistakes, then we don't ever take risks. And I don't mean risks like playing on the side of the highway, but I mean risks like, should I try that? We sometimes, some kids and some adults, super cautious, overly so, because they're just afraid they'll make a mistake. And they think that that's all wrapped up with all that stuff that making a mistake meant when you were in school. And in real life, it's not.
And even I think that fear of mistakes is something, and I was talking about earlier, how sometimes we can be scared to have a conversation with our kid, right? Because we're fearful they may take it the wrong way, or we're fearful they won't, like whatever, they'll have a bad reaction to something that we say. But it was a defining moment for me, like a couple years ago when I was reading that, I think it was Attachment Across a Life course, when he mentioned that, 50% of our, the connections we try to make in a relationship go awry, right? And it's what is really important is the next connection.
Right, your next move.
That you come back to it, right? That
right.
Doing or saying something wrong isn't the end of the world. It's like, I just learned something. He didn't take that the way that I meant it. Or she doesn't like when I use that word. And we're learning more about them. We're learning something new for them.
And about ourselves. Why is this a big deal to me? Why, Yeah, what am I trying to do? I'm just trying to get them to agree with me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say it yet another way that maybe this way they'll choose what I want them to choose.
You learn so much about what our underlying
you learn about yourself,
expectations are, right? By what we say.
You get to hold that big mirror up and say, well, now looky there.
That's what it's like. Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That hand, it's like you're opening because
it's so much learning from that. Oh
yeah, we know each other so well that they can see they see everything underneath the words.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Right? Oh yeah.
These are real connections that we have, and it's okay for them to call us out on Mom.
Oh, and they will. They will, and they will continue to. And and that's good. That's good and healthy. I think that sometimes, and that may be something we've got to work through. We may have this thing about respect and listening to your elders and all that kind of stuff that a lot of people grew up with. And when you get a little nervous or you get a little panicky about things that are happening, those pop back up.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I always
dismantling it is important.
Yeah. I was always and am always a big fan of I just keep asking myself why. Why is that important to me? Why, why do I think that? Just to dig.
And then for me, it would boil down to, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid is going to happen? Mm-hmm. And is that a rational fear? Could it maybe go differently than this disaster story I'm telling myself?
Well, and and then I would get to the point where I would think, okay, what if that disaster story happened?
Right.
What would it look like?
Right.
And then if you actually imagine yourself on the other side of it, so often it's really not as bad as imagine.
So often
we're still alive,
So often all that worry, and it's gonna happen how it's gonna happen. Mm-hmm. So I mean, whether you're running around penny the sky is falling or you decide, no, I'm just gonna be the calm spot. I'm going to be the place that ideas can be bounced off of. I don't lose it the minute somebody thinks differently than me. That makes people more likely to bring things to you if you don't lose it. Trust me.
Yeah. It's so true, to be able to, because I think that's the other thing. This fear also makes us want to solve it so fast. We were talking about that mm-hmm. earlier too, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're just so caught up in reacting and trying to solve things,
right,
you're not going to be that kind of calm port in the storm, or that rock, or that person that can bounce things around. If you can instead be in the moment, and seeing what's happening and processing with people and realizing it's okay to sit here for a while. We don't need, 95% of the time, we don't need an answer immediately. That's not a true emergency. We can take time to talk about things and process things and how did we even get here?
Hard to say. Hard to say. But I hope your dear listeners don't mind just traveling down this windy road with us. Hey, y'all, come on.
Hey, you know what? I think it leads so nicely, or I think it is a lot of the answer to the next question. So I'm just going to let people know what the next question was.
There you go. Whatever.
So sometimes the questions that I get, and I'm sure you get, involve additional challenges, right? For teens, like things like anxiety, or we touched on before what they might describe as laziness, which can often be that cocooning time or that deschooling time. And what are your thoughts around approaching those kinds of situations? And I think that's a lot of what we've been talking about. I don't think they per se, they don't need something different, because the point with unschooling is we are getting to know each other as individuals, as the person we are, and we're trying to support them, whoever they are, whatever all the constellation of who they are as an individual is. So, if anxiety is something that they're dealing with and struggling with, we are helping them find their way through that, right? If laziness is something, if that's a way we're labeling behavior, that is again a fear, and we're processing through that, right? Whatever our fears are, it's taking that time.
Well, and I think that it's really, really important when we have those kinds of negative thoughts like laziness, because that is so tied to this idea of productivity.
Yeah.
And, and what we expect and so we really need to look at that, so that when we think, I can't have him on the couch for another day in a row, or I can't, can't you? Really? Is that the end of the world?
Exactly.
And so we needed a couple more days than you thought. What are you afraid of? So pull it out. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid they're going to lay on the couch for the rest of their life? I can tell you 100% that is not going to happen. They're going to get up and leave eventually. And how they relate to you, though, is going to be directly related to how you relate to them while they're laying on the couch.
Yeah.
So if you walk around saying, oh man, you're such a lazy bum. Oh man, I wish I could just lay around on the couch all the time. Oh man, if you just like a dig every time you walk by, you just think about, are you making this relationship better or worse? Are you making your connection to them better or worse? Can you just sit on the couch too and say, man, this is such a great couch? Can you just connect with them?
Yeah.
Can you relate a story of when you just didn't feel like doing anything, or something happened and it bummed you out for a while, or you couldn't figure out what to do next? It's so nice to have comfy furniture.
That's so important, I think, to be able to connect with them where they are, instead of trying to pull them to where you want them to be. Connect with them where they are. That's where you can join them. That's where you can learn more about them. And I think if you're constantly trying to, even in the nicest language,
I know.
them.
That nicest language can really, really hurt you, because you're clearly saying where you are is not good. Where I want you to be is the good place. Yeah. Make my choice.
And what you're doing at that point so often, I think, is having them stay longer on the couch, because what you've made it is now when they choose to get up, it looks like, and it feels to them like they'll be choosing it to make you happy. It's no longer their choice. You've just taken that choice out of their hands because you've made it about you.
And turned it into a power struggle.
Exactly.
You got enough power struggles. You don't need to create them.
Yeah, you created that. It's a power thing. And now if they get up, they're going to be, giving it to you. They lost that battle, right? So they're going to stay as long as they can until they can't put up with it anymore.
Stop with the battles. Right.
Yes, that's a huge one.
Yeah, more than stop with the battles. Get okay with where they are, who they are right now, right in front of you, even if it does not look the way you thought it was going to look. It looks how it is.
Yeah.
Do you still love them? Of course you do. Do they need to know that? Yeah, they do. Yeah. They really do.
Yeah. So once that stopping with the battles is the first step. But you don't stop there, because then if you stop with that battle, then so often it's like, okay, then I'm going to stay away. right? Okay.
Right.
If I'm not going
Right.
to battle them, I'm going to go in the kitchen and do my thing, or I'm going to go wherever and do my own thing and leave them on their own. That's better, I guess, than battling, but there's still that next step of connecting with them, of being okay
Exactly.
with where they are, of understanding them, supporting them, let them see your trust and love, and knowing that they're okay
Right.
who they are right now, right today, right? Because that helps them. That takes all that weight off them of worrying, they're worrying, is there something wrong with me, etc.
Yeah.
Does my mom
They
hate
are.
me for what I'm doing? She's never coming
Right.
around. And all those things are going through their heads. And they're so busy worrying about that stuff, they don't actually get a chance to think much about why they literally feel like lying on the couch.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And that's where their answer is. But if you keep them worried about all this other stuff, it takes them so much longer to get to that actual self-awareness piece of understanding what's going on for them deep down, that has them in that spot right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.